The city has people on Delhart that aren't active city officials. Heartland does not.
Okay, everyone, if you guys could take your seats, be much appreciated. All right, we're going to call the Common Council meeting to order. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Yes, Jeff Crickon.
Here.
Jim Barron. Absent. Jackie Valdy.
Here.
Wayne Dean.
Here.
Matt Grimmer.
Here.
Kevin Maples.
Here.
Tim Eicher.
Here.
Kent Atwell.
Present.
Tom Hafner.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, first order of business is a proclamation of the commendation for James Badcock of Hawks Inn.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to say a quick word, and that is, with all the stuff that we get to do as a city council, in my experience over the years, most of it's looking forward, dealing with development and things that are current, and a lot of conversation right now is about what's going on with the BP gas station site, and thinking back in my involvement with Hawks Inn, well, that's the Hawks Inn site. It's not the BP gas station site, and so we have to think about the history of Delafield and what we're all about before we can really set our sights on where we're going in the future. And something that really highlighted that was the recent Round the Corner episode with John McGivern, where right at the beginning of every show, they show and talk about the history of the city that they're in and gives you roots about your identity and where you're going. And so thinking about all those things combined in my experience with Hawks Inn, I met Jim Babcock about 15 years ago with my daughters getting involved as docents. And what he's done for the city and Hawks Inn and preserving history is extremely important for the foundation of this community. And when I asked the mayor to consider him for a special commendation, he said absolutely. And so we've got it together, and Mr. Babcock's here, so I'll let you do your thing.
Great, thanks. We can do it however you like. So whereas James Babcock was a founder of the Hawks Inn Historical Society in 1960, and whereas an authority in the American decorative arts and Hawks Inn era between 1846 and 1865, he was instrumental in the selection of the furnishings for the restoration of the inn and also donated many period antiques of his own. And whereas after his retirement from his antique business, he served as the volunteer curator of Hawks Inn for 20 years. And whereas he donated over 800 valuable reference books of his own to create the James Babcock Library in the lower level of the Delafield History Center. And whereas he has faithfully pursued the mission of teaching and preserving the history of the town and the city of Delafield for the past 59 years. Now, therefore, on behalf of the city of Delafield, we express our formal appreciation to James Babcock's service and dedication to the Hawks Inn Historical Society, and extend the thanks of a grateful community for his considerable role in preserving a Delafield treasure and National Historic Site. Dated this 18th day of March 2019.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, we gotta take a picture. All right, then I'll give this to Mary.
Okay.
Just a quick word. Thank you for doing this.
You want to grab a mic? Come up and sit.
Just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for doing this. This is a special man, and he deserves this recognition. And I've always said he's the greatest correct political person I've ever met in my life. So, thank you, Jim.
That is fine.
All right, then we'll move on to item number 2, special order of business. Presentation by Phil Cosin, CIPMA and Senior Municipal Advisor with Ellers regarding options available to the city to address its structural budget deficit and the impacts of reducing the city's minimum fund balance goal contained in its financial policies. Presentation will be followed by questions and discussion by the Common Council. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Tough act to follow, and I tend to follow those acts, it seems like at times. So, well, thank you for having me. I was engaged about 2 months ago to at least at that point, think about what options the city would have to deal with some of the structural budget issues that you've experienced over the last couple of years. And so I don't come to you with all the answers. I come to you with some alternatives and some options you can consider. And then obviously, as you make your deliberations and make some decisions, we can certainly help you and help you through the process. One, if you decide to look at one of these options, and two, we can at least run analysis for you to kind of have a better understanding of the financial impact, long-term and short-term, of implementing one or a few of these different options that are available to the city. So with that, I'd like to just kind of kick this off. And I think there is a PowerPoint that hopefully you can get up on screen. I do have a few extra copies as well along
It's
the case.
in our packet.
It's in your packet, okay. Well, I wanted to get a little foundation first, just because I think it's helpful. And the first slide in kind of speaks to the kind of why. Why are you in this situation? And I don't know if it gives you any better comfort knowing that you're not the only community that deals with this issue. And as I go into the different options, you'll understand that I have better understanding that other communities have implemented some of the different fixes because they were in the similar position as the city. If you go to the next slide that is available, that's the background. So the background I wanted to get into a little bit was levy limits. And I think everybody has a general understanding of levy limits and what it means, but levy limits has been around a long time. It's been in 2005 when it was implemented, and it initially dealt with the 2006 budget. And the current restrictions on levy limit growth for communities is net new construction. So, one of the challenges the city has had is just growth. And, there are communities that are fast-growing communities that may have net new construction that could be somewhere 4, 5, 6%, and sometimes that's enough to kind of keep up with some of the overriding costs that you have that go up at 2, 3, 4% a year. You have not grown to that level, and so as costs increase and you're only able to increase your levy by net new construction, there's a disconnect. And then you couple that over 13, 14 years of levy limits being in place, and it kind of magnifies over time and really creates some difficulties. So the net new construction number has changed a little bit over the years. It started out net new construction and or a rate of inflation or a certain percent, but where you are today is net new construction. One of the provisions that are outside of that are debt payments, and that's an adjustment that you can make, and have checked with the city, and you do take the full adjustment for debt. So debt you actually levy as part of your budget is allowed outside of the levy limit, so debt can increase and it goes up with the levy amount allowed. But as debt drops off, it drops off as well. There was a slight modification to levy limits included in the governor's budget. We'll see where it goes. What was proposed is net new construction or rate of inflation, whichever is higher. That would get you somewhere in the 2.5% range potentially. net new construction. But it'll have, bottom line, minimal impact, even if it's net new construction and/or rate of inflation, or percent of inflation is what's also being talked about as a possible gap here to get passed. But I don't think it's going to have a significant event. It's not going to be a significant change that's going to provide you with the relief you're looking for. So if you go to the next slide, there are different options that we've looked at. Use of fund balance, I'll talk about that in regards to what it could do to your rating. I'll talk about that. I have a couple of slides. Operating referendum, I have some information on operating referendum and successes that have gone on throughout the state. Wheel tax, I know you've discussed wheel tax at least at some level already. Stormwater utility, you already have that in place, so that would not be a new revenue source. Street light utility, transportation utility, and then the always daunting reduction in service that can be coupled with an increase in revenue or can be a standalone issue. But to me, if you're going to get into the reduction in service, that's a whole separate study that would need to be done that would allow you the ability to take a look at that as an option. So let's talk a little bit about use of fund balance. You know, you currently have a policy at 25% of annual expenditures, and that it fits well within what the rating agencies would consider applicable or what you should be at given your AA2 rating. So somewhere between 20 and 25% is what would be expected. Currently, you use funds in excess of 25% to really supplement the tax levy and cover some of your structural deficit. So that's been the practice that you've used over the last number of budgets. So, word of caution, maybe prior to dropping the amount of fund balance, the city could should consider really the following two potential impacts of that. One is political and one is financial. So you're a AA2 rated community and a very strong rating, especially for the size community you are. You're a wealthy community when you look at it throughout the state. That's what props up your rating as much as anything else. So politically, if you see a drop in rating, the impact isn't that great. And I'll talk about what the impact is a little bit, but there is a perception that the city is having financial challenges. Now, that'll be kind of a newspaper article will pop up and it'll say city's rating dropped from AA2 to AA3, and it'll cite a couple of reasons why in the rating report. And the rating report number one would probably be draw on fund balance. That's when you look at a rating report and you start talking about all the impacts and all the reasons you have a rating. Number one by Moody's, S&P, or Fitch is going to be fund balance. What's your rainy day fund look like? What does your working capital fund look like? And if you're drawing that, systemically drawing that over time, there could be a drop in rating. So what does that mean if you have a drop in rating besides the political issue of seeing it in the paper and having the local people that read that paper say, uh-oh, we got problems at City Hall. The reality is it's financially not that significant of an issue. It will cause you, when you go out and borrow money, there's an interest rate associated with when you borrow the money. And what a rating from AA2 to AA3 would mean is about 10 to 15 basis points. So 1/10 of 1%. Now, over a couple $1 million over a 10-year period, which is what you tend to borrow money, that impact isn't that great. So financially, from the standpoint of impact to the bottom line, there's a little impact, but it's not significant. And it's not why you should consider this. I think it's more of the kind of political impact. What does it look like outstate as far and in your community? What is it telling the investment community as it pertains to the city's financial health and due to the rating change? So use of fund balance is a short-term fix in my mind until other measures are implemented. And you could probably get by for a year or two using that fund balance, continue to draw down that fund balance and maybe 20% or somewhere between that, and use that as your structural budget shortfall, the way to cover that. But I see that as really a short-term fix. We've put together a rating comparison chart. I think this is always helpful for you to see how you compare to some of your neighbors, similar rated communities. Remember, you're a AA2, you're being compared to not just Wisconsin credits, but nationally. What we have here are just some Wisconsin credits. What we've identified is Germantown, Grafton, Sun Prairie, Bayside, and Verona. And you can see that the second column in says current rating because they're all AA2. They're comparable in rating, same rating as the city of Delafield. And if you kind of look at, there's all these different criteria for how they determine rating, and these are the primary ones that they'll look at. And if you go from left to right, they'll look at the overall debt burden. That's not the city's debt, that's the taxing district's, school, county, and the city debt, and Waukesha County Technical College would be part of that as well. That's overall debt. What portion of the debt is your share? Direct debt burden is just your debt. You can see you're on the low end when you compare it to all the rest of the communities that we've compared you to. 10-year payout, how quickly you're amortizing your debt. Again, you're on the 100% of your debt is being paid within 10 years. None of the other communities can say that. Direct debt per capita and overall debt per capita, you tend to skew a little higher than most of them because, again, you're a relatively small in population compared to some of these other similar rated communities. So those numbers tend to be a little bit higher. Average annual growth, you can see if you're Verona, if you're Sun Prairie, if you're Grafton, they've been pretty high growing communities, and they haven't experienced as much of a crunch when it came to levy limits because they're getting that net new construction growth compared to the city of Delafield. Undesignated general fund as a percent of operating revenues, you can see where you stack. And then the last couple of columns in here are really kind of the wealth indicators. How do you compare to other communities on a population or valuation chart? So this gives you kind of a nice benchmark. You can see where you stack up compared to other communities that you are similarly rated to. What this does tell me is that when you look at fund balance, you're probably on the high side of that when it comes to fund balance, on the high side of similar AA2 rated communities. If there is the desire to use some of the fund balance and drop below what your stated policy is, then I think you need to establish your objectives within your policy of when the money can be used, how it can be used, and how far you're allowing yourself to drop, and really establish that number. That will be shared with the rating agencies. It'll be at least a well thought out approach to using fund balance, as opposed to just we're using fund balance to balance our structural deficit. So that's a rating comparison. I'll talk a little bit on the next slides about some of the different options that are out there. You know, operating referendums, back in 2005, 2006, when we heard about the first operating referendum, I kind of laughed and said, who the heck's going to actually, no one's going to pass an operating referendum. If you think about it, it's not easy, but it's easier to pass referendums when you can say it's for the kids, it's for schools. It's a little bit more difficult when you say we need this money to operate, general government. But there's a process you go through, and I'll talk a little bit about what's happened of recent. The referendum must be held in November. So it can't be a special election. It's got to be as a regular November cycle. That's been a change in state statute. What we have seen in almost every case is that typically the referendum and the increase in spending that you're asking for is tied to something. And typically that something has been public safety in most cases. It's been police and fire. That has been the lion's share of the budget. That's what goes up the most typically in budgets. And that's what you're tying it to, something like public safety and the increases that you're seeing. No restriction on the amount that could be requested. That's a calculation that you would tend to put out there so people understand why you're asking for the increase. This is base building, and in my world that means something, but what that means is if you get a referendum, I'm just going to pick a number and say it's $250,000, you ask for $250,000 referendum increase in levy limits, then that $250,000 stays there and is part of that new number that you build net new construction off of. So you get the value above the $250,000 based on the net new construction. So that's part of the base building under the levy limits. Recent results, I can tell you that there were approximately 10, and I say approximately, I talked to the DOR last week, and what they shared with me is that approximately 10 were passed statewide last year. And the only reason is they say approximately is because they have not been certified by the DOR as part of the levy limit process yet. So they expect to be having 10 new, and there were 19 that were passed between 2006 and 17, with the vast majority being in 16 and 17. So it's a trend to see more and more of these come forward over the last 3 years or so. So unlike use of fund balance, I see this as being really a long-term fix to kind of deal with the structural deficit going forward on an annual basis. I think from a political standpoint, you really want to make sure that this is tied directly to something. Yes?
Yeah, I just have a question. The 10 that passed in 2018, is that based on what size municipality or all municipalities?
All municipalities. There were a number in this area over the last 2 years. Milwaukee County, a couple of communities had referendums that passed. So there were more in southeast Wisconsin in the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
Phil, when you say base building,
Yeah.
if you were to ask, let's use your example of $250,000, you're talking about that as being an increase on the levy of
Correct.
that amount of money?
Correct.
And then based on moving forward, if your net new construction, as it increments up, you're still adding that $250,000
Correct.
indefinitely, or is that a term?
Indefinitely. It can be indefinitely, yeah.
Or it could be a term that's defined by the referendum.
You certainly could do that,
Okay.
yeah.
So you could have a new referendum to reduce that back down?
Yeah, you could, I mean, for instance, you could do something that say, this is gonna be 5 years, and we're gonna bring it back to the voters after 5 years, and maybe you have to revisit and ask for what the new number could be. But base building, what I'm talking about is, just say your levy is $1 million, and that's what you're levying right now, and this allows you to go to $1,250,000. Just say you have a 1% net new construction number. So instead of 1% on the 1 million, it'd be 1% on the 1,250,000 going forward.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so it's base building off of what your allowed increase is going forward. Any other questions on referendum? I'll go to wheel tax. I think you've already discussed this to some extent. I'll just kind of touch on this quickly. Process-wise, the city would pass a resolution enacting the wheel tax, and that resolution is submitted to the Wisconsin DOT, and along with an application that they have out there on their website. It's a pretty simple process. There is a 90-day lag between when the formal application is made and when you would actually start collecting revenue. So if it's part of the normal, then why we're telling you this is if it's part of the normal budget process, you probably would not receive a full year's revenue because it'd be too late into the year to be able to collect the following year's full amount, giving that 90-day lag. Funds are distributed monthly in an account designated on the application. The tax continues in perpetuity until another resolution ends it. And I know Marie had prepared these numbers. The estimated annual revenue based on a $20 wheel tax would generate $125,000 and $156 if it was $25 wheel tax number. Again, what we see from a practical standpoint is most municipalities that go through this process are targeting this towards something. In most cases, not all, but in most cases, it's roads. I mean, it's kind of logical. You're doing a wheel tax, and it's for work that's being done on an annual basis. It's certainly, if you have an annual road budget that goes to fix potholes and overlays and that kind of stuff, you certainly could use this to pay for that, and then that would free up money in your budget for other purposes. So those are the type of things that are done with the wheel tax. So again, it's become widely used around the state, and where I live, not far from here, it's not used, so I'm not disappointed. But
I think you did say in one of our other conversations that you can have two different wheel taxes, one for commercial vehicles and a separate one for a typical residential.
Yeah, I
vehicle.
have not seen that.
Oh, you
But it
haven't?
can be, yeah. It's been typically just vehicles that, and the DOT actually has a pretty clear a number of vehicles that would qualify directly on their website.
Are motorcycles included in the wheel tax then?
Automobiles,
Auto-
automobiles and
And light trucks, yeah, I don't think so. So anything else on wheel tax? Questions? The nice thing again, from an applicability and kind of a long-term fix, it sits out there, it's in perpetuity. You have another resolution that you would have to adopt to kind of close it. And it's a kind of a longer-term fix for you. We're going to get into two more of the, I'll call them a little more obscure, that are out there. Yes, there is something called the street lighting utility, and it's been implemented by a number of, not a number, by a few communities around the state, and more are looking at it. But simply, this is the model that was used by one of the communities that did implement it. It's in the Madison area. Fee is developed to cover the electric bill for street lighting. So you would identify, and it's clearly defined. I understand on talking to the kind of the audit guy in our office that there is a direct, when you look at the power bill, how much goes to street lighting. So what you're doing is you're identifying the ability to pay for that street lighting, the electricity for that over a bill. And what the example that they developed was for a typical residential unit, it's considered one unit. And non-residential or multifamily could be a business, it's 2 units. And then you divide up the number of units defined by the amount of the power bill that you're trying to cover, and then that is essentially developed through a fee. And so you develop an ordinance to implement the street lighting cost recovery fee. It's billed directly through your utility billing system, so that's the nice thing about it. It's not something separate that is going out from the city, and it's accounted within the general fund or a special revenue fund. So I know of 2 communities only that have implemented this. I know a number of others are looking at it, but 2 that have are both in the kind of Madison, general Madison area. The last one, and I needed a lot of help on this because I've only heard about this. So transportation utility, and to my knowledge, there's been a couple of studies done, especially in areas that have significant truck traffic because the deterioration of roads due to truck traffic. So process and implementation, treat transportation system as a municipal utility, like a water or sewer utility. Assign a user fee based on the relative use of the system. So you're trying to come up with the math behind who's using your streets. And then you're going to be creating a utility around that. This started out west. No municipalities in Wisconsin have created this utility. Oconomowoc tried a couple of years ago, and I will tell you it went down in flames. The fee generally is based on trip generation. And it'll be applied by property type as much as anything else. This gets to me very theoretical because you're trying to measure or transportation and where people are coming and going. And to me, it's a very difficult one to probably justify as well. But again, it could be a long-term fix of something you consider. We just haven't seen it implemented in the state.
Did they do it around the time that the Target Distribution Center was built?
That's when they
That's what they were targeting?
Yeah. They were looking at the impact of additional truck traffic, significant truck traffic, and how to kind of deal with the long-term impact of the streets that they were going to expect.
So that's more designed for commercial.
Commercial, there are places that have significant trucking companies in the area, or a couple of people in your business park that are heavy truck traffic, and it's with those kind of those type of uses in mind. So the last on page 6, again, I mentioned service reduction certainly could be done along with or in conjunction with generating additional revenue. It's always a tough one, and I think that obviously would take a much broader study and review before you would get into any kind of service reduction. But that's certainly, if you have a structural deficit, has to be on the table as well. So in summary, there are, we try to kind of build this from what we're seeing. We're certainly seeing, I think use of fund balance within reason isn't going to hurt the city. And I think if it's well thought out and you don't dip below probably 20%, I think you could probably make a pretty strong case to Moody's that you still are very sound financially. And I think we could probably, again, work through that so that we don't see a downgrade. No promise, but I think we could with a lot of work on the front end with Moody's on that. But again, I don't think that's a structural, something that's going to solve this issue. The operating referendum and the wheel tax are, quite frankly, the two easiest, I'll call it. And the wheel tax is probably the one that is people's quick default because, again, it's not something that the city, you're implementing it, but it's being collected by the DOT and then forwarded back to the city. So you're not generating additional work at the city level. You're not taxing your staff. It's really being handled through the collection that's already happening with the DOT. So it's probably the easiest one to implement. And then, if you do decide to go down the route of a referendum, we certainly can provide you with a lot of examples of recent requests and how they were worded. And kind of how they were targeted for use as far as the increase in levy through a referendum.
Great, thank you. So the reason we're doing this tonight is to get us up to speed on what the council's options are to address our operational budget structural deficit. If we continue to spend what we have and the laws stay the way they are on the caps, we're roughly getting rid of 5% every year. So you can do the math to show you how long it's going to take you to get to zero. Mm-hmm. So these are some options that we have to try to address this. In fact, all the options we can think of.
All the options that have been implemented in the state. The only we didn't put in garbage tax because garbage tax is actually a tax that is one of those that if you create a new fee for garbage tax and it comes off of your levy, you're required to reduce your levy by that amount. So it's not generating additional revenue, it's just replacing. So we didn't include that on here. But all of these would be actually supplemental revenue as opposed to coming off of your levy.
Phil, isn't that back up for question in the governor's proposal as far as the fee type things that potentially they might not be counted against you in the future?
Yeah, it is. It's going to be an uphill battle. Yep. To change that practice that has been in place for a while. It'll be an uphill battle. Yep. I think there's more likelihood to a softening of levy limits to something like net new construction and inflation or rate or a percent of inflation. Mm-hmm. I think they'll be more amenable to that as opposed to changing that fee issue. Mm-hmm. Just my take. Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to have an open and honest discussion, with the community as to where our realities are. So.
You're a very interesting case study in that I don't think people would think that you would have a structural deficit, only in that you're a relatively wealthy community. And when I mentioned this being an issue in our office, and it was kind of a lot of people kind of looked up and went, well, but again, growth is, for good or bad, growth is what gets you out of some of this, and you struggle a little bit with more growth and especially with a tax base that you have, and that's part of the issue here. You have a very high tax base. When you look at your OI, and to grow it by 1%, you need a lot of development, or to grow it by 2%, you need a lot of development. So it's a unique situation that you have here.
Phil, the increase in the interest rates, the basis point, from a reduction in our bond rating would only affect new debt.
Only affects new debt, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, or?
I'll just make a comment. I appreciate the fact that we're getting ahead of it, because historically, we're going on 8 years probably, where we've got this fund balance carryover that we kind of spread out to maybe longer.
It's just been like 4 years that
4
we've
years?
been using fund balance to cover a deficit in the budget.
But it's been our fund balance exceeding the 25%. So right? I mean, so when our fund balance is, we're not.
Well, we came out of the Great Recession, we dipped down below the 25%, and it took a couple of years to get back up to 25%.
Okay. But so we've been playing with that. We're not looking at that. That the luxury of that is leaving us, and the growth hasn't caught up to take its place.
Correct.
And we've seen that. We've talked about it each budget cycle. So this isn't a real big. This
and
isn't a
it's-
gotcha. Like we're just been kicking a can down the road. It's just been something that where organic growth typically would just grow us to the point where we're covering new expenses. We just haven't been there.
And it's not just that. It's not just that our growth isn't keeping up with inflation, but we've actually, on top of that, added services, added staff at the same time, which has compounded the issue.
Understood.
I just want to clear, one thing to be clear on, net new construction is actually new construction. So if you think about growth in the community and just say your house value went up $20,000 or $10,000, that doesn't count. That's just adding to, compounding the problem a little bit, because you're not able to capture that, but it's growing your you're growing your value. So it's true new construction that gets pulled out, and that's what you're able to increase.
Yeah, and similarly, if someone tears down $1 million building and
Right.
puts up $1.5 million building, you only get credit for the $500,000 of new
Right.
growth.
Is the estimated annual revenue from the wheel tax based on all vehicles registered in the city or just one per household?
All vehicles registered in the city.
So somebody with 3 or 4 vehicles is going
Yeah.
to pay a lot more than somebody else?
And that's a per vehicle tax, not a per wheel tax, correct?
Per vehicle tax, yes.
It'll
It's
get
called a
added-
wheel tax.
it would
Times
get-
4,
It would get added right onto your annual registration that you pay to DOT for your car.
yeah.
Is there already county wheel tax that we're paying with that registration now?
There's not in
Not in
Waukesha
Waukesha
County.
County. Milwaukee
Milwaukee.
County has one, but not Waukesha County.
All right.
So Waukesha County could put a wheel tax on, and if Delafield has a wheel tax, technically you'd be paying 2 wheel taxes then.
Yeah, that happens in Milwaukee right now.
Yeah, that happens already, yeah.
One's at 30 and one's at 20, so combined it's $50 in Milwaukee.
Yeah, to my knowledge, the county isn't considering it, but, I'm not part of their budget discussion,
Sure.
so to my knowledge, they're not.
So overall, what would $125,000 in a wheel tax do to our structured debt?
On average, I think over the last 4 years, our structural deficit's been around $250,000, so that would cover half of it.
But we'd still probably have to look at the other options besides that.
It would just be a partial solution.
And while growth certainly helps, right? You'd have to develop a lot of land in
Yeah.
Delafield
Which we
very
don't have.
quickly.
Which we're running
to
out of.
have an effect, right? We're not talking about one building here, one
Right.
building there. I mean, you're talking about having to, because we've had development. I mean, we've approved a number of new buildings on vacant lots and things like that. But based on what we've committed and voted on spending, growth helps, but we can do graphs and give you the numbers, but you'd have to do a lot of development to catch up.
And we'll see a first run at the budget numbers. Like when are we thinking that we can have our arms around that so we can make a decision on
Yeah, so
what this year looks like?
typically, the first draft of staff budgets, we don't have them until August, and this year we're looking at like mid to late May to pull something together, which gives department heads an opportunity to see their first quarter results. We should have our audit completed by then, and give department heads kind of from mid-April to mid-May to put together their first draft of a budget for us to take a look at.
And Michelle, if we did an operating referendum, we'd have to have that by what time to be able to have it for the November election?
I haven't seen any different deadlines than the regular ones, so I think I have the exact date up in my office, but I think it's around August, July or August. We'd have to have the wording in, but I can get you an exact date for the next meeting.
And an interesting issue this year is there is no scheduled November election. So for us to consider a referendum this year, it would have to be a special election just for this, which is probably a $5,000 cost just to hold the election.
Yeah.
So there may likely be some significant benefit to, if the council wanted to pursue a referendum, considering a possibility of lowering our fund balance limits so we can use some of that fund balance this year and then possibly go into referendum next year.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
We're trying to think as far ahead as we can, folks, so.
No, it really helps.
Well, great. I appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
in. I think it was educational for anybody watching, anybody on cable or TV, and the council as well, so.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Phil.
And if there are follow-up items you'd like to hear more about, I'm more happy to bring those forward, so.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to number 3, City of Delafield citizen comments pertaining to the consent agenda. Seeing no citizens, those are closed. Is there a motion for the consent agenda, item number 4?
Move to pass the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Item number 5, City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to items not on the consent agenda. Again, seeing no citizens, those are closed. We'll move on to number 6, committee reports. Licenses?
We have a license for a temporary Class B retailers for Chamber of Commerce for the block party to be held July 12th, 2019.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, then we have another temporary Class B retail license for Chamber of Commerce for the Fall Festival to be held October 15th, 2019.
Move to approve.
I'll second that
Should
one
we
as well.
vote on those?
You're gonna
Yeah,
vote on them all?
You want me to?
Should do a vote, yeah. You can lump
Okay,
them
on the
together.
first one, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
On the second one, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then the next one is temporary Class B for St. John's Northwestern Military Academy for their Excalibur, held April 27th, 2019.
Move to approve.
I'll second. Question, what's Excalibur?
I don't know.
Golf outing?
It's an event that they hold, I work there part-time. It's an event that they hold to generate funds for the school itself.
So this is an annual thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Number 6B, Planning Commission, Mr. Eicher.
Okay, we did not have a meeting since our last meeting, but I'll retroactively make a point to mention, there was an item on our agenda where Clearwater Outdoors, if you remember, they've been running some paddleboard and kayak type rentals out of St. John's Park. Their application was asking for a permanent permit to do that into the future. And they've been performing great. I don't, if anyone has complaints, forward them to staff, and so we can have record of them. But they've been performing well. We just suggested that we continue the annual renewal. They can come up. So if there's any reason, either they're not performing well, or there's competition saying we're going to be that much better than them, or something else comes up, we just didn't think it was a permanent application was appropriate. So we're going to see them every year, and they didn't have any problem with that. But if anyone ever asks why they get access and no one else does, they just get in line for the following year and say why they'd be better than them. So the other thing is we've got a meeting then on March 27th where we're going to be going over the specific implementation plan for Chick-fil-A, where we talk about just the fine tuning, architecture, those other things. So if anyone's interested in weighing in on that based on what's in the packet when that comes out, please let us know.
So the 27th?
Or 28th.
Let's see here.
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday the 27th.
That's different. This is the ref.
Oh, this is,
Yeah,
This
Wednesday,
is a
so Wednesday the
road
27th.
Yeah, that's that.
And let's see, and then just check the meeting minutes or notifications, the packet before that if you have anything else you want to address. That would be it for Plan Commission.
Great, thank you very much. 6C, Lake Welfare Committee. Mr. Barron is not here. 6D, Park and Recreation Commission, Mr. Grimmer.
No meeting, no report.
6E, Public Works Committee, Mr. Dean.
At our last meeting, the Public Works Committee approved the 2019 street budget and awarded the contract to Wolf Paving for, I think it was $383,000, and that'll be submitted to you for approval at our next Common Council meeting.
Sounds great. 6F, Delafield Commission, Mr. Maples.
No meeting, no report.
6G, Police Commission.
No meeting, no report.
6H, Library Board, Ms. Valdi.
We had a meeting. And I have a couple things that our director asked that I mention. Delafield Public Library has been chosen as a 2019 recipient for the Pewaukee Area Arts Council Fine Art Placement Program. That means, the translation is, a local artist will be commissioned to create a piece for the library around the theme of Lake Nagawicca. It's kind of cool. March 2nd, they had a meet and greet, and I am very sorry I didn't go. It was a program for dogs who are up for adoption from local shelters. There were several shelters there. 232 people attended, and quite a few puppies found a new home. Upcoming events on the 28th of March. A presentation of Women in Politics in honor of 100th year anniversary of women's right to vote. Vanessa Lanas, who is Senator Tammy Baldwin's regional representative in Waukesha County, is going to talk about the senator's experiences as a woman in politics as well as her own. April 11th, Untold Delafield series, which sounds kind of cool, the history of Old World Wisconsin. And April 17th, I love this one, Backyard Chicken Chat. Interested in raising your own chickens or finding out what goes into building a roost? We will have a chicken chat at 6:30 p.m.
You'd be surprised how many chickens we have in the city of Delafield.
I know.
Quite a few.
I just want to know where I can get that.
We just don't have anybody that counts them.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. 230 people for the animals. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right.
We didn't have a specific number of adoptions, so I'm sorry for that.
Thank you very much. So 6I, Board of Zoning Appeals, Mr. Maples.
No meeting, no report.
6J, Promotion and Tourism, Mr. Barron's not here. 6K, Lake Country Fire and Rescue.
No meeting, no report. Oh, Jeff, I'm sorry.
Commission, yep. No meeting, no report to my knowledge. So L, Lake Country Fire Board.
As Matt said, no meeting, no
There we
report.
M, Tree Board, Mr. Grimmer.
No meeting, no report.
Last but not least, Deer Committee, Mr. Dean.
As of today, our harvest is 92 deer, which exceeded our original goal of 80, and we still have a week left, and the sharpshooters still have to, well, they say they will hit our goal with another 11, so we should finish with over 100 harvested in the first year.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Great job.
What increases that just offhand? I mean, that's got to be like 5 times what we've got.
Yes, because
Yeah.
last year, all we knew was about 20 that we harvested.
That's what I thought,
so-
about 5 times. That's amazing.
So we should be at 103 to 104, I'd say, by this time next week.
Wow.
And then they will have concluded and they've done all their testing with the CWD for the DNR, so we're in compliance with our application. And our next meeting
Awesome.
will be April 3rd for the deer management at 5:30 prior to the Public Works meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Number 7, unfinished business, seeing none. Number 8, mayor's report. I did want to mention that tonight is Jeff's last meeting, and I want to thank him for all his service to the community over many years as an older person, and I know you'll still be around.
I hope so.
If
Thank
you
you.
read the paper, I won't be, but I will be. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Number 9, new business. Discussion and possible action to approve the assessment error correction for parcel DELC 0799.995, which included real property improvements which were not completed as of the date of this assessment. The requested claim for relief from taxes is $850.08.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. 9B, discussion possible action to approve an assessment error correction for parcel DELC 0749.047, which included real property improvements which were not completed as of the date of the assessment. The requested claim for relief from the taxes is $425.08.
So moved again.
Second and again.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. 9C, discussion and possible action on the request of Jim Ryer on behalf of the Delafield Arts Foundation Incorporated for the funds of the $75 cancellation fee for the use of the fish hatchery and the fees paid for the canceled March fundraiser to their May fundraiser instead of paying again.
So moved.
Second.
I would have hoped we could have taken that without putting it on the agenda.
Yeah, well, this, they're applying the funds forward because of some nasty event that just kept them from.
Makes
All
total
right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, passes. Item number 10, report by city officials, administrator.
Yeah, this evening I just want to mention what our efforts are with regards to public informational efforts regarding the referendum. Before you this evening, I had a couple of documents. One's a public informational sheet that we put together with a bunch of bullet points regarding the referendum question, the proposed improvements to Gulf Road, just trying to get the information out there publicly so that people go to the elections with full knowledge of what they're voting on. That document is going to be prominent on our homepage of our website, and then individual blurbs are going to be sent out on social media, probably several times a day on Facebook, things like that. And then we also are going to have a informal public informational meeting. It'll be a question and answer session that will be at the Fish Hatchery building on Thursday evening, March 28th. People can stop by anytime between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. that evening. And if they've got some questions or want to talk to staff about the improvements or the referendum question, we will be available to meet with them at that time. Any questions on that?
Just reiterate, what would this passage of this referendum cost the average homeowner?
There will be no impact to the tax levy or general taxes as a result of the passing of this referendum. The entire cost of the improvements would be borne by development and existing businesses along the Gulf Road corridor.
Okay, I'll ask that every meeting, just to make sure everyone, I think people need to understand that this is an improvement that's benefiting those businesses and they're paying for it.
In the event it's not passed and improvements need to be made there, who would bear the cost of it?
Yeah, it'd really be up to the council, but this is a 1995 road. It's past its 20-year life expectancy. It needs improvements. There are some access issues, turning movement issues there that need to be resolved. And if the city's unable to move forward with $1 million project, it's likely that we would have to take a piecemeal approach to making corrections to the road. And in past experience, the cost for those types of improvements have been borne by general taxes and the general taxpayers.
Which this would be a good argument for a transportation tax for that particular area.
Or we can go the route we are proposing with a developer agreement contribution, special assessments of existing businesses. And it's just really a unique opportunity for the citizens of Delafield to take advantage of an opportunity where private development would fully fund needed infrastructure.
Is this document, is there a direct link to that at the city website, to what you just produced?
Yeah, did that go on today yet? Or?
I'm not
It has not
finding
gone on yet. Wait, after you guys
So
review it a little bit?
It'll be up tonight?
It'll
or
be up tomorrow.
It'll be
Okay,
up tomorrow.
great, thank you. I'd like to be able to send that to people and just have them look at it? Okay. Because what's on there now is just a bunch of information from Public Works, so this is more succinct. I'd like to.
We'll be putting out multiple pieces of information throughout the next 2 weeks about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any suggestions for improvement on how we communicate? Anything you think we should add? Looks pretty good.
Maybe have them in the atrium and by the library, where people who are here, maybe put a special sign out there for people to grab
That's
these
a good
flyers.
idea.
Hard
Get a lot of
copies?
get a lot
Yeah.
of get a lot of traffic through there.
Okay.
It's a good idea.
Kind of along those lines, just a question. Have you monitored our YouTube viewing? Is this going anywhere?
We do have at least 50 people viewing the
Okay, good.
videos, I believe, yeah.
Good.
Cool.
I don't know how many of them are watching them more than once.
They are
I know
limited.
who's watching it tonight. You know who's watching it tonight is Kelly Smith.
Oh,
That's right.
He's not here.
Sorry I said that, Kelly.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone. And I just need to jump back to the mayor's report real quick. Reminder that on April 16th, we'll be having the organizational meeting where the mayor will make the appointments and then the council will consider those appointments. 10B, clerk.
Just a reminder that we have an election 2 weeks from tomorrow. And then the next item we have on the list is the discussion and action on the voucher list, if I may, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. 10C, council request for future agenda items. Any items you'd like to add? All right. I'll refer you to correspondence in the packet. Seeing no further business, the meeting is now adjourned at 7:55.